You're probably not expecting a ton of Charlotte Hornets content on your YouTube, but we need to talk about LaMelo Ball. We need to talk about the future of the Hornets. And we need to talk about the fact that this guy just cannot stay on the floor right now. So the reason this is coming up is because LaMelo, it was announced that he is going to miss the entire rest of the season. His year is done, and he has now played between this year and last year 58 total NBA games, and some of those he ended up leaving early. And in the beginning of his career, I think year one he played like 50-something games. Year two he played like 75 games. The last two seasons he just has not been available, and that is a massive issue for a couple of different reasons for the Hornets moving forward. One, he is their best player, regardless of what you think about LaMelo. I think it's hard to really fully evaluate him. One, given the talent around him, and two, given the fact that he hasn't been very available, but he is an incredible passer, great playmaker, a high volume three-point shooter, not always the most efficient, but there's a lot to like there about LaMelo. There's a reason that he was drafted as high as he was, and it's just hard to figure out exactly what the direction is going to be when he's not available. The other big issue here for Charlotte, arguably the biggest issue, is his new rookie extension kicks in next year. He starts making $35 million a year next year, and then it goes up and up and up over $40 million a year for the next handful of seasons for LaMelo. And there's a reason that he signed the contract. It's because through his first two seasons, he was worth that. But if you're going to be playing 35 games every year, that is just not a sustainable way to build a team. Your best players have to be available, especially when you're a team like Charlotte that needs to draft and develop well in order to put together some decent teams, because free agency is just not really going to be an option for them. And having not only a massive salary like that is going to be restrictive in terms of how they can continue to build their team and add players, but also having someone that just isn't available makes it that much worse. Not to mention the fact that Brandon Miller has had a fantastic rookie season. I've talked about that on this channel, on other channels. I had major question marks about Brandon Miller coming in the draft process, at the summer league as well, where I watched him in person, just looked like he had zero confidence. Throughout the season, he has been, other than Victor Wembanyama, the most impressive rookie in the entire league, and it hasn't really gotten as much attention as it should have because he's in Charlotte, but the defensive instincts are there. He's got great length, great size, individual scoring stuff has been there, and you could certainly argue that as of this moment, Brandon Miller is the best asset on the Charlotte Hornets, especially when you account for the contract of LaMelo, which then you start thinking about, okay, what's the future? How can we continue to build and grow and develop a team here? Because Charlotte has been trying to do this for a decade now, where they get an interesting young player, they try and add pieces, they're not on the level of being a contender, and then they tear it down and they restart it. They did it with Kemba, they've done it with a variety of different versions of the team, and they've been able to get, one or two guys over the years, but they've never been able to put together a truly competitive team, and that's going to be even more difficult if you have someone like LaMelo on the team that's not available and is being paid a ton of money. Now, just because for two seasons he had a ton of injury issues doesn't mean that he's going to continue to have those issues. We've had guys, throughout the history of the league that have a couple of bad years in terms of availability, and then they figure it out. And LaMelo, when healthy and looking like he did through his first two seasons and then continued growth and improvement, is a fantastic asset for Charlotte, and him alongside Brandon Miller in the backcourt is a really good combination, a combination that I think works extremely well together. So there can still be some positives here, but there's two different ways that this is going to go if you're Charlotte, right? Either LaMelo comes back next year, healthy, ready to go, he's available over the next handful of seasons, he's a borderline all-star, all-NBA caliber player over the next couple of seasons, and you have him alongside Brandon Miller, and then you're starting to build something. You use some future picks, you add some guys through free agency, and you're starting to look like a competent Eastern Conference franchise. That's one path. The other path is we continue to see the version of LaMelo Ball that we've had the last few seasons, which is someone that just isn't available nearly enough, and then you start to have conversations about potentially trading away LaMelo and what you could potentially get in return for him, because even with the availability issues, there are teams around the league that would be willing to deal with some of that stuff if they could also potentially get the upside of what a healthy LaMelo would look like. I'm thinking about a team like potentially Orlando that would be okay adding that kind of a big number in order to add a guard that they really, really do need on their roster. There's a handful of other teams around the league as well that I think would be willing to buy low on LaMelo even with the big contract and hope that they get something resembling what he was in his first two seasons. So this is all just a very complicated situation because it's even with, the first two seasons, really the second year mostly that LaMelo had, it's hard to, like, the opinions on him are still so varied because the talent level was so low, because his style of play is just very, he's very involved. Like, he does a lot for you. He has the ball a ton, and it's hard to really evaluate how much that impacts winning, even when he was fully available in year two. And so what it's going to come down to is the potential trade value of someone like LaMelo. I wouldn't be surprised if this offseason or next year there are real rumors about him potentially ending up somewhere else. and what Charlotte could get out of that. Because when you think about the lack of availability in the contract, typically that means that you're not going to get a ton, which is probably going to mean that Charlotte is just going to have to keep the guy and hope that this continues to progress. And honestly, it's unfortunate because if in some theoretical universe LaMelo was healthy and looked like he did in year 2 this year, I think there'd be some pretty cool positive momentum going right now for the Charlotte Hornets because of the rookie season that Brandon Miller had, because of the combination of those two guys, because of some of the flexibility that they're going to have moving forward. And the cap's going to continue to rise, and the contract might not be as bad necessarily as it seems like it will be right now. But when it comes down to it, you got to be on the floor. You got to be available. And if he's not, it's a huge issue for Charlotte. And this kind of goes along with something we were talking about, the other day with that bad contracts video, right? This is one of the only true dangers of giving out these big rookie max extensions, is the possibility of injuries and guys not being available. We talked about it in the context of Michael Porter Jr., although he's been certainly more available lately. This is really the only way that we're going to end. I think at least one of the only ways that we're going to end up with really bad contracts in the NBA is these big rookie max extensions that get handed out to guys that are really good in the first couple of seasons and then just get hurt and aren't available. And to have one of the truly bad contracts around the league would be really tough for a team like Charlotte that doesn't obviously want to spend a ton of money. Now, having said all of this, it's entirely possible that in a year, 2 years, LaMelo's making all NBA teams and he's available. He's fine. The contract is actually of value. And then we're talking about a Brandon Miller rookie max extension. And then you've got those two guys as the cornerstones of your franchise. There's certainly a positive direction that this could go in Charlotte. And they have talent in those two guys, which is something that in the past they haven't always had. And of course, they're going to have an opportunity to continue to add to that in the draft this year. It's just when you're thinking about how to build your team, especially when you're going through a rebuild, when you're trying to add young talent, it would be really helpful in terms of the direction of the team to know that LaMelo is healthy and he is ready to go and exactly what he's going to look like over the next couple of seasons. And there is just a ton of uncertainty with LaMelo right now. And that, by and large, is the LaMelo Ball problem, is just this guy should be your best player. You have a complementary piece alongside him in Brandon Miller that looks like he's going to be really good and a perfect fit alongside LaMelo, but you don't know what exactly that guy is going to look like. You don't know when he's going to be on the floor. And that just creates all these unnecessary variables for Charlotte that they're going to have to contend with and figure out. And so at the end of the day, this is something that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on over the next, 12 to 18 months, is how that relationship between LaMelo and the Hornets potentially goes. I wouldn't be surprised if, given the history of that family and everything, that they would be okay moving on from Charlotte, going somewhere else if they don't feel like they're valued and they're welcomed. Potentially some other teams being a little bit aggressive and adding LaMelo because they see it as a really good buy low opportunity. Or maybe the Hornets are like, no, like this is our guy. We're not going to lose him. We understand the marketing value that he provides. We understand, how big of a deal it would be if he was really good here in Charlotte, and how good the combination of him and Brandon Miller could be. And it's just one of those situations where you just kind of have to guess, right? Like if you're Charlotte, you just have to guess, okay, we're going to keep him because he's going to be healthy. That's what our medical staff are saying. It's just some freak injuries. That kind of stuff happens. Or you have to guess, hey, it's just never going to happen. Let's get value now. And the value of LaMelo Ball as a trade asset, given these injuries, given his contract, given his age, given his potential, given some of the uncertainty with his play style, all of that to me together creates one of the most interesting situations around the league. And one of those that people probably aren't going to be talking about a ton because, of course, it is the Hornets. But I'm telling you, this Brandon Miller rookie season has opened up some really interesting possibilities for the future of the Hornets. A lot of that future, of course, is going to be tied to exactly what they do with LaMelo over the next 12 to 18 to 24 months.